Hey guys, this is Tommy Dimsdale with the National Association for Gun Rights, and today we're diving into something just a little bit deeper than your average typical history lesson. We're going to discuss something that is absolutely imperative for gun owners to know and understand. Now, if you skipped all of my previous Foundations of Freedom episodes, that's totally okay to go ahead and watch this one. Go back and check them out if you want to, but this could be the most important one that you need to watch, understand, and educate fellow gun-toting patriots on. Now, don't forget, if you want to keep up with this series and others like Dudley's Range Rogues or Tap Rack Bang, click the subscribe button below and turn on notifications to make sure that you don't miss a single episode brought to you by the National Association for Gun Rights. So, what's so important here? We're going to be answering the question, what are our gun rights actually based on, and why do they even matter? What makes our gun rights as sacred as rights, a sacred right, as opposed to the hordes of leftists who are willing to demand anything they want is a basic human right? Well, this concept does take some significant explanation, but is absolutely imperative that we understand the truths that our founding fathers were talking about when they cemented the foundation of our country in something called inalienable rights. Now, this is also referred to from Thomas Jefferson as the laws of nature and nature's God, because if our rights aren't based on anything, what good are they? Why can't literally anything be a right? Well, there is a reason behind that, and we're going to dive into that concept of natural rights so that you have a better understanding of just how solid your right to bear arms really is, not only in America, but the governing of the laws of the universe. Welcome to NAGR's Foundations of Freedom. We'll start off with the first musings of the laws of nature and nature's God with the Greek philosopher Marcus Tullius Cicero. Now, hang on, don't click away just yet, because if this bored you to death in school, believe me, it did me too. However, we're going to look into some truly just fascinating stuff here that they would never dare teach you in the public education system. Marcus Tullius Cicero, who lived in 106 to 43 BC, had a truly remarkable and wise stance regarding natural law. True law is right reason in agreement with nature. It is of universal application, unchanging, and everlasting. It summons to duty by its commands and averts from wrongdoings by its prohibitions. So let's take that part just a little bit. This already sets up a natural order of checks and balances that men will reap what they sow, and there's absolutely no way of getting away from it. Natural law summons to duties by its commands, meaning that there are things on this earth that must be done as natural law commands, such as protecting our liberties. If they are not protected, they will be trampled. Natural law also averts from wrongdoing such as criminal activity and sin, as it presents unavoidable consequences for these unjust deeds. Now, this should not be misunderstood in any way that good things will just magically happen for you if you do good, or that magical punishments will spring out of nowhere for doing wrong. It's not karma. However, what natural law does command is that the good works of men will naturally improve one's life based upon the results of said good works, and equally the results of sowing distrust, anger, and theft result in a lower standard of living for men. Now, this fact cannot be altered. So I do want you to stay with me on this, because this logic is building on the fact that our right to own guns, to bear arms, is indeed inalienable. Cicero also stated, it is a sin to try to alter this law, nor is it allowable to attempt to repeal any part of it, and it is impossible to abolish it entirely. We cannot be freed from its obligations by Senate or people. So he's talking about government here and highlighting the fact that even if government attempts to take away the sting of repercussions for living irresponsibly, it will ultimately make the situation much worse. Think of Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty, for instance. And we need not look outside ourselves for an expounder or interpreter of it. So later on, we're going to see that this is true as he discovers that natural law is indeed self-evident. And there will not be different laws at Rome and at Athens, or different laws now and in the future. But one eternal and unchangeable law will be valid for all nations and all times, and there will be one master and ruler that is God over us all. For he is the author of this law, its promulgator, and its enforcing judge. Whoever is disobedient is fleeing from himself and denying his human nature, and by reason of this very fact, he will suffer the worst penalties even if he escapes what is commonly considered punishment. So what Cicero is trying to explain here is that those who attempt to violate the law of nature and nature's God will ultimately pay the price for it. The universe simply does not allow injustice. Now, whether we look around and see justice being excised and played on for wrongdoers is within question, and there's a lot of examples, probably even in your own life, of seeing people flagrantly, brazenly violating the law with seemingly no punishment. However, Cicero insists that punishment will befall these individuals even if they escape what is commonly thought of as punishment. For example, legal ramifications. So natural law, let's talk about this. It's basically the law that enshrines our right to self-defense. That being said, it cannot be repealed, it cannot be altered, it cannot be ignored, and it cannot be broken. And that goes for your gun rights. We'll explain that soon. Even though today's politicians, ne'er-do-wells, and even we ourselves at times often pretend that we are breaking God's law, when in fact there is really no escape from it. We cannot break it because the consequences of attempting to violate natural law are already ingrained in the very fibers of the universe. When those who attempt to violate the law, the fact that they receive punishment for their actions, and whether that be legal, physical, spiritual, circumstantial, whatever, is the fulfillment of natural law itself. It cannot be broken. One action will be repaid with another. For instance, any government that attempts to violate the natural rights of its citizens through the use of gun control will see a spike in crime. They will see unrest, and they will even see economic perils, as many countries do, as crime drives away businesses. And the citizens that shirk their natural responsibilities and duties to alter said government will also reap the punishment that comes along with apathy and inaction. So Cicero found it very compelling that humans had such an advantage over every other living being when it came to our ability for thought, intelligence, and self-awareness. He further supposed that humans, unlike all the other living beings on earth, shared a divine concept with nature's God, that being thought and reason. In his writings he says, "Therefore, since there is nothing better than reason, and since it exists both in man and God, the first common possession of man and God is reason. But those who have reason in common must also have right reason in common. And since right reason is law," capitalized law, notice that, "we must believe that men have law also in common with the gods. Further, those who share law must also share justice, and those who share these are to be regarded as members of the same commonwealth. If indeed they obey the same authorities and powers, this is true in a far greater degree. But as a matter of fact, they do obey the celestial system, the divine mind, and of the God of transcendent power. Hence, we must now conceive of this whole universe as one commonwealth, of which both gods and men are members." Now, whether you believe in one true God, gods in the plural, or no God at all, Cicero is laying out his argument of a divine construction of reality, that the laws cannot be broken, no more than the effects of gravity can be denied. It is wound into the very fabric of our existence as our right to bear arms. Now, the truly astonishing thing about Cicero was that he didn't rely on the past teachings of Aristotle or Plato, but he instead mimics the future teachings of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Essentially, we now have an idea of what natural law is in this explanation. We understand that our gun rights are based on natural law, but what is natural law based on? We got to find the answer to that, and we can find that answer in Matthew chapter 20. So when legal scholars are attempting to corner Christ in their questioning of him about the law of the day, and these scholars sought to trip up Jesus in his teachings, considering the breadth of the law at that time listed into hundreds of different commandments. When asked what was the greatest commandment, you may know this story, Christ answered. He said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the greatest commandment." But you see, natural law doesn't just stop there. It exists as a binding law between how we are to treat not only God, but one another here on earth. This is the reason that Christ voluntarily, without being asked, offered up a second commandment. He said, "And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Now, likewise, Cicero stated, "For these virtues originate in our natural inclination to love our fellow man, and this is the foundation of justice." It is the foundation of justice. The truly astonishing thing here is that when Cicero made these comments, it was decades before Jesus ever brought forth the idea. These truths were self-evident to man and given to man through God's creation, not exclusively just through the teachings of Jesus Christ. Cicero discovered that the basis of natural law was the undying love of God, God's law, and our fellow man. So if this solely rests on the love of God and our fellow man, how does this translate to the rights outlined in our Bill of Rights? Well, there's a whole list of things that fall under natural law that dictate that if we love our fellow man, that we will indeed reap the benefits of said law. A few of these list into inalienable rights, unalienable duties, the idea of habeas corpus, limited government, separation of powers is one, checks and balances, self-preservation, the right to contract, justice by reparation, no taxation without representation, and of course our favorite, the right to bear arms. All of these are an example of natural law. If you notice, all of these ideas were enshrined in the foundation of our government by the founding fathers so long ago. It's very important. So I could go through each one of these and how they link to natural law, but that could take a while. So just look back at some of these and think about how our love for our fellow man translates to those ideas. But I'll give you a few examples here real quick. For instance, the idea of habeas corpus lends love to our fellow man by not imprisoning them without rightful charge. The concept of limited government lends love to our fellow man by not allowing a majority to wield the powers of government over a minority of people. No taxation without representation. That lends love to our fellow man by ensuring that we are not using the authority of government to steal from one another. And of course, the one you've been waiting for, the right to bear arms, not only ensures that the previous concepts that I mentioned are protected, but that we allow our fellow man the opportunity of protection from those who attempt to violate natural law through, say, bodily harm or damage to property, ensuring the concept of self-preservation is protected. But let's go through a litmus test here. This might be controversial for some, but it's fact of what natural law is and what it's not by applying the idea of lending love to our fellow man. So let's say that many people are saying that healthcare is a fundamental right. Well, they could say that we're loving our fellow man by giving them free healthcare, right? Well, not actually. The idea of this concept violates self-preservation and taxation without representation. So to force healthcare to be a fundamental right, you have to either A, violate self-preservation by forcing doctors to provide a service for free, or B, steal from your fellow man to pay for the cost of said healthcare. Neither of these are in conjunction with the idea of loving your fellow man, and therefore, when governments attempt to bend or break this natural law by claiming that healthcare is a natural right, the law will still stand resolute, as government only makes healthcare less available to the general populace, and it erodes the services that are so well presented when the tenets of natural law are actually adhered to. Just one more example, same thing for claiming that maybe affordable housing is a fundamental right. It violates the love of man by either forcing someone to build the houses for free against their own self-preservation, or stealing from others to fund the construction of said houses. Now, once again, there's a whole new set of repercussions that natural law presents to correct the injustice presented by, just claiming that housing or healthcare is a fundamental right. So, when we look towards gun rights now, we see that tyrants violate the idea of self-preservation in order to secure their authority over a populace. Likewise, you have these small-time state reps and senators today that violate the love of their fellow man by forcing their constituents to jump through hoops, pay fines, and attend mandatory government training just to allow them to exercise their natural right of self-preservation and self-defense. Distrust of one's fellow man is not a virtue in love, and that's what they're exercising. That's exactly what some of these anti-gun politicians harbor when they vote against pro-gun legislation like constitutional carry. Now, likewise, when leftist liberals try to enact dangerous red flag gun confiscation laws like what we've seen in Florida, it violates the idea of habeas corpus by confiscating firearms from individuals with no due process. It egregiously violates the idea of limited government that, if properly limited, would not have the power to take firearms from their fellow man. And in all this, gun control is an inherently immoral, evil concept that brings on untold horrors for its implementation. Its basis is founded upon hatred for our fellow man, distrust of our fellow man, and the violation of our fellow man's natural rights on numerous levels. Cicero strongly warned against tyrants and the whims of an immoral society. He said, "The most foolish notion of all is the belief that everything is just which is found in the customs or laws of nations. What of the many deadly, the many pestilential statutes which nations put in force? These no more deserve to be called laws than the rules a band of robbers might pass in their assembly. For if ignorant and unskillful men have prescribed deadly poisons instead of healing drugs, these cannot possibly be called physicians' prescriptions. Neither in a nation can a statute of any sort be called a law, even though the nation, in spite of being a ruinous regulation, has accepted it." Cicero is shedding light on the obvious truth that just because something is either socially accepted or is codified in law does not make it compatible with natural law. In fact, Cicero is strongly condemning the idea of using social norms and laws as a guideline for morality, emphasizing the fact that these arbitrary measures have no impact whatsoever on natural law. The two great commandments are what all right reason and true law hinge upon, nothing else. Well, I do hope that this gives you some clear understanding as to just why your Second Amendment rights matter so much and just how solid a foundation they stand upon. It is absolutely imperative that we recognize the indisputable fact that our rights stand upon the same unshakable ground as natural law. They are natural law. Our rights cannot be changed, they cannot be repealed, and they cannot be revoked. They come from a power far greater than any man-made government. But in order to avoid the consequences of these governments attempting to revoke our rights, we must also recognize our inalienable responsibility and duties to stand for freedom, to protect our Constitution, and fight for what is good and just. For if we ignore our natural duty to fight, we're no better than the politicians and thieves in government who ignore our natural right to bear arms. Natural law also holds you and I accountable if we neglect our responsibilities to fight for what has so graciously been given to us. We must stand up to tyranny wherever we see it if we wish to retain these precious tools of liberty bestowed to us by a higher power. Now, you can help do just that by joining the fastest growing no-compromise national gun group in America, the National Association for Gun Rights. So for just $30 a year, you can join the fight and stay up to date on what you can do to help protect our sacred right to bear arms. I'm going to include a link here in the description below that you can click and do just that. Not only are you going to be notified of upcoming battles and what Biden, Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi are doing to trample your Second Amendment rights, but also I think you can take quite a lot of joy in knowing that your donation is going to help fuel the fires of liberty to deploy aggressive mail, email, texting, and social media campaigns. All of these efforts going towards holding anti-gun politicians' feet to the fire should they dare look to enact any of Biden's dangerous gun control schemes. I hope you enjoyed this installment of the National Association for Gun Rights Foundations of Freedom episode, and don't forget to click below the subscribe button, like, comment, and turn on notifications to keep up with everything that the National Association for Gun Rights is doing in the battle for your gun rights. Y'all have a blessed day.